Hello everybody, this is Dr. Wes Moore and welcome to this lecture on monopolistic competition and oligopoly. Now I know these may seem to be big words, big terms, and maybe confusing terms, but they're really not that hard to understand once we get into them. So let's go ahead and get started. So what do we want to talk about today? First of all, we want to talk about monopolistic competition. What is it? Let's define it and talk a little bit about it. And then we want to talk about how monopolistically competitive firms win customers. So when firms that are in this type of market structure, how do they win customers to themselves over others? And then thirdly, we want to look at oligopolies and ask, what are they and how do they work? So let's get started. Overview of monopolistic competition. The first thing we want to talk about is a market structure. We need to understand market structure before we can really understand monopolistic competition. A market, think about the term market. A market is anywhere buyers and sellers get together to exchange products for money. So that can be a physical store, it can be a farmer's market, it can be online, eBay, Amazon, any of those places where buyers and sellers come together to exchange products for money. That is what a market is. And a market structure is just the way the market is set up and operates. And it would include factors like the number of buyers and the number of suppliers. Are there tons of buyers and suppliers? Are there a few buyers and a few suppliers? Or what's the combination? And then the similarity of the product offerings. When you take the supplier's products, how close are they to one another? How easily can they be differentiated so that customers can know differences and make choices? Thirdly, the ease or difficulty of entry into that market. So how hard is it? How expensive is it? How complicated is it to enter this market for a product versus that market for a product? And then how are the firms competing? How are the firms competing? How much do the buyers know about all the products that exist? How much do sellers know about different production mechanisms? How equal are they in how they compete? Is everybody just competing on price because there's no difference in the product? Or are there differences in product that create differences in prices? So those are the questions that we ask, the elements of understanding a market's structure. So when we're thinking about monopolistic competition, we really have to go back to something that I haven't spent any time on and won't spend a whole lot of time on it, something called perfect competition. Let's understand perfect competition relative to these four factors, and then that will help us understand monopolistic competition relative to these four factors. So in perfect competition, the number of buyers and suppliers is many. So you got tons of people making the stuff and you got tons of people buying the stuff, so that no one has very much control over the supply or the price. There are too many buyers and too many sellers for any one player to control or influence price or supply very much. And then in perfect competition, the products are all exactly the same. There's almost no way to tell them apart when you look at them. They're all what we call commodities or standardized products. And then ease or difficulty of entry. In a perfectly competitive environment, there is basically no difficulty of entry, no barriers to entry. You can get in and out just as quick as you want to. And then in terms of competition, everybody knows everything. So all the suppliers know all the tricks about making products cheaply or making them better. All of the buyers know who all the competitors are and all their products. There's no information asymmetry, as they term it. So this is what we call a perfectly competitive environment. And the reason I don't talk much about it is because it really doesn't exist in the real world. There's really no example that I know of a market that's like this. It's just an academic exercise to help you understand the market structures that exist, but it doesn't in and of itself play out in the real world. Now let's look at monopolistically competitive firms. Let's look at monopolistic competition as compared to perfect competition to see what the differences are. We've got number of suppliers, we've got many of each, right? So we still have that similarity, a bunch of buyers and a bunch of suppliers. In terms of similarity of product, they're not identical, and this is where the differences really start to show up. They're not identical. They are different enough so that customers can tell the difference, and that suppliers can make something that's different from someone else. It's relatively easy to get in and out of the market, but it is not as easy as in a perfect competition. So there are some barriers, but there just aren't a ton of them in most markets. And then there are differing levels of knowledge. So supplier A can know more about making a product or know how to make it better or cheaper than supplier B. When it comes to buyers, they don't all know all the competitors. They may know 2 or 3, but they don't know them all. If you've ever tried to buy a product you weren't familiar with, you start looking for who sells it. But some years down the road, you may realize that there were several that you didn't know about that you wish you had. See, that's a monopolistically competitive situation. So price is not the only factor there. We can make our products different because of the level of knowledge that we have and the level of knowledge that buyers have. So this is really where most of the real world comes in. Most of the real world is monopolistically competitive in the West, in free market economies. So that's why we want to focus on it so much. And let's take an example here. Let's look at an example of Mexican food, the Mexican food restaurant industry, where you're going out to buy Mexican food, sit down somewhere or buy something to eat that's Mexican. And let's look at it in terms of these 4 factors here. So let's take, for example, these 3 vendors. We got Chipotle. Everybody's familiar with Chipotle probably. You go in, select menu items, you order sort of in a cafeteria style, tell them what you want in your burrito or your tacos, and then you pay and sit down and eat. Okay? Then you've got sort of your typical Mexican restaurant in anywhere USA where you've got 5 or 6 Mexican places within probably 3 or 4 miles of your house, where you go in and you sit down. It's a different owner, and the menus are typically similar, but the taste may be different or the offering may be slightly different. But you sit down, you get a waiter or a waitress, you give a tip, and so on. And then you've got the food truck. You've got a food truck here. So the guy just pulls up. He's got everything in the truck that he needs to make your Mexican food. He pulls up to your office. You go in and you order it. You go out and you place an order. He hands it to you, and you're on your way. So you can see here that we've got many different types of suppliers here. You can see that their products are not all identical. You can see that it's relatively easy to get in and out of this market. Now, it's not perfectly easy, like perfect competition, but you get a little money together and you can get yourself started in one of these types of restaurants. And these vendors are not competing on price only. Price is important, but not price only. So you can see how Mexican food here, the restaurant industry, is an example of monopolistic competition. Now let's discuss for a moment how monopolistically competitive firms win their customers. In this real world scenario, which you're going to go into if you're not already in it, in your career you're going to enter into, and most of the businesses that you're going to work for are going to be monopolistically competitive. How do they win customers? Well, I want to talk to you about what I think is the most important word in all of business. Most important word in all of business. And that word is differentiation. Differentiation. And that is the characteristic of being different, able to be set apart from another. This is critical in business because, remember, we talked about monopolistically competitive firms is most of what we have. And customers are looking for something different that meets their needs. And so differentiation is really critical. If you don't differentiate your product, you can only sell on price. And in all of my courses, I encourage students, do not sell on price. You'll have low margins, you won't have a lot of money, you won't be able to take good care of your customers or your employees or your building or anything else. There's just very little money in competing on price. So you have to focus on differentiating yourself in a way that makes you valuable to your customers. Here are some ways you can do that. I'll give you the terms, the ideas, and then I'll give you some examples. First of all, you can have physical differences in your product or your service. That's differences in performance, colors, attributes, design, anything that will attract customers that is different about your product. Secondly, location. Differences in where the customer can get your product, how easily and quickly they can get your product, whether it's geographic or virtual. In other words, physical location or online. Services. Difference in the non-product services that are offered, such as design services, technical service, installation services, any of those things. Almost any product, regardless of how similar it may be to other products or how much we might consider it a commodity, toilet paper. Anything can be differentiated with services. So if you're in a business and you feel like everything you have is basically the same thing the guy down the street has, focus on services. And then image. Image. Differences in the mental associations customers place on your product. What they think of when they see it. Do they think of a luxury item, a status item? Does this make them cool? Does this make them smart to their friends and co-workers? That would be image. Now let me give you some examples here, just one example for each. Physical differences. I have a convertible. I have an old Toyota convertible, and I have to, this isn't my car by the way, I wish it was. The thing about my convertible top and most convertible tops is you have to be stopped in order to lower the top. Well, this is an Audi S5 Cabriolet convertible. And the great thing about this product, we're talking about physical differences, is that this top can be lowered while you're moving up to 30 miles an hour. So if you pulling out of your driveway and you go, oh, I need to let the top down, you don't have to stop in the middle of the road. All right, so that's a physical difference. So someone may choose to buy this car over another car because of that particular difference. Location. Something that you've probably seen, and I've seen this in my local convenience stores, is Amazon's basically a box where you can order something online and ship it to this box and you can go there and pick it up. So here's an example of a location. So let's say that you're traveling, or you don't have a place to ship something, but you need to pick it up quickly. Then you can choose to ship it to one of these boxes, and Amazon might get your order over, say, Walmart.com or Target.com or something like that because of the location that they allow you to get their product. Services. I talked to you about my convertible. A couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to upgrade the stereo in the convertible. And I knew of a company up in Virginia called Crutchfield. I knew them from when I was a kid, I knew them when I was in high school, and I knew them in business. Well, I'm not a car audio guy. I don't know that much about car audio. I've learned a lot through this process, but I spent probably $4,000 or $5,000 buying all the components to upgrade my car stereo. And it's sweet. It's freaking awesome now. But because I didn't know very much, I needed someone who did to help me buy all the right stuff and to help me when I put it in. Well, that's the difference in Crutchfield. Crutchfield, they have knowledgeable people, and their whole process is designed to help the do-it-yourselfer car audio guy to do it. And so the sales guy, he helped me figure out what I needed. And then when I had problems installing, because I did it all myself, I could call their tech support and they would walk me through how to do things. And so they were selling everything that you buy from Crutchfield, you can buy from Walmart. Well, not really necessarily Walmart, but say Amazon. All right? But I always go to Crutchfield because of their services. So I value those services. So there's an example of services. And let's hit one more car. Let's hit one more car example. I've got a sister-in-law. Hopefully she never watches this video, but she got a new car recently, and she got a Porsche. This car right here, I don't think it's this color, but she got a Porsche Cayenne SUV. And knowing this person, I know the reason that she bought this car. She bought this car because it makes her look cool. It makes her look good. It's European. It's expensive. It's all about the image. That's why she bought the car. So people buy stuff because of these types of mental associations. And if you want to differentiate your product, you may build a brand that approaches or creates value in that mental space in a customer's head. All right, so let's finish up here by talking for a few moments about oligopolies and how they work. Oligopoly is maybe a new term to you. It means a few. It doesn't mean many. It means a few suppliers. Okay. So let's look at the definition. Market structure characterized by so few firms that each behaves interdependently. So in oligopoly, you've got, there's no specific number, but you got 6, 8, 10 companies that control most of the business, more than 50% of the business. And because they're so big and because there are so few of them, when one makes a move, it affects the others. You see, in monopolistic competition, if I'm a supplier and I change my price, it doesn't necessarily mean anybody else is going to change their price. Or if I change a product option or something like that, nobody else really cares that much. But in oligopoly, because there are so few and they control so much business, if one changes the price, it affects everybody. Everybody else has to respond to that. So let's dig into this a little bit more. That's what interdependence is, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment. All right, and so there are really two types of oligopolies. There's what we call undifferentiated oligopolies. And this is where the product that they're making or providing can't really be differentiated or set apart from its competitors. So examples here would be oil. When you buy oil, when you produce oil, you pull it out of the ground, you put it in barrels, it's oil. And the difference between Exxon's oil and, say, Shell's oil, not a lot of difference. All right? Steel. Steel, you get a steel bar of steel from Nucor is the same as getting it from U.S. Steel or someone else. There's very little difference in the products. They're very similar. And then we have what we call differentiated oligopolies. This is where there's a handful of suppliers, but their products can be differentiated in a way that the customers like, even though they're in the same class. Examples here would be Toyota, would be automobiles, and breakfast cereals. So someone like Kellogg's. Believe it or not, there aren't a ton of people that make breakfast cereals. So interdependence, this key term here, interdependence, can be seen clearest in the undifferentiated market, oligopoly. All right? So example, so let's say that Nucor is making steel that other companies are going to use to make their products, okay? Because the products are so close, all the steel so close, if Nucor lowers its price 5%, it gets all of the business because there's really no difference between the products. All right, and so all the other firms in that oligopoly have to match that price right away or they'll lose all their business. You see that? They're interdependent on one another. Now in the differentiated side, they are interdependent, but they are not as interdependent. Let's take the Toyota example here. All right, think a Toyota Camry and a Honda Accord. All right, they're both cars, they both got 4 wheels, they're both in the same basic product class, sedan. They're basically about the same size. All right, but there are differences in these products that cause people to want a Honda Accord over a Toyota Camry. So if Toyota was to lower its price 5%, would this immediately cause all Honda Accords to stop selling? No, no. It may move some people over, but it's not going to change it that much. So in a differentiated oligopoly, the interdependence is less, but it still exists. Now finally, let's hit why oligopolies exist. What is it that makes them... Oligopolies are not bad. They're not bad. It's just the nature of the type of product that they're making pushes the suppliers to a smaller number. Let's look at this for a minute. All right, economies of scale. Economies of scale are, as you get bigger, your cost per unit reduce over the long term. So your average cost is going to go down. You can buy more equipment, more specialized equipment. You can split up your labor into more different types of people are focusing on different labor, so they're getting more efficient. And so the nature of building cars, for example, requires economies of scale, or you could never make one that anybody could buy. You know, if I tried to build a car and I made 10 a year, they would cost $2 million each. So economies of scale is very important, and it causes there to be fewer competitors. Then you got the high cost of entry. The scale of production that we're talking about here to get to economies of scale also causes you to have to spend a lot of money up front to build plants, to buy big equipment, machines that can press metal, bend metal, high-tech software and software packages. So it's a lot of money to go in. Think of how much money it would take to build an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico if you're Exxon, and how much expertise it would require to safely drill and process the oil that you received from that rig. You see, a lot of costs, a lot of barriers to get in. And then because of all these things, when somebody tries to get into an oligopoly, they're trying to move into that market, the big competitors go after them. The big firms, they react very strongly when someone tries to enter the market. They can cut prices, or they can spend more on advertising, and they can make it very hard for new companies to get into that market. So that's why oligopolies exist, and that's why they're not bad. So we've come to the end of this lecture. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed sharing it with you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.